Happy Indictment Day. As you're aware, Trump is going to appear before the court in Miami, Florida today. And yeah, he's facing charges for the classified documents scandal. We have reporters there. We will be covering this all day. In fact, I'll be also doing my live tonight as well, 7 p.m. And I think I'll also be on the NTD broadcast as well at some point. I can't remember the time. It might be like 5 o'clock or something like that. I will keep you updated on that. That said, though, well, the day has finally come. Folks, they've been saying it for, what, 5, no, 6, 7? I can't even keep track. Over 6 years now. Trump is going to be arrested. Well, they finally did it. They finally got the guy. They finally got him. But we're seeing now that it's backfiring, frankly. They got what they wanted, and Trump just skyrocketed in the polls. I'm not even joking. Trump skyrocketed in the polls. He's polling at 61%. DeSantis is basically out. He has a 40-point lead over DeSantis. Like, Trump just won the Republican nomination. That's it. And I'm trying to figure out why this is. I mean, you know, I have my own thoughts on this. On one point, it's because, well, you know, the Republican Party is uniting around him rather than abandoning him. I think the game was this. This is what I assume, at least, right? My own analysis. I think the game was this, that they wanted to surround Trump with so much controversy that nobody wanted to touch him. They assumed, I think, that Trump, he's old. I'm not being mean, you know, he's an old man, you know what I mean? A lot of old people, I would not want to deal with that. You know, maybe I'm too old. But a lot of people would not want to deal with what he's dealing with. A lot of people would not have the energy to deal with it, or the mind room to deal with it, or just the spirit to carry on when being attacked from so many directions all the time. One thing was very telling to me when Trump announced his run for presidency just recently, and it echoes with when Trump was president. I went and read some of his books because I was trying to understand his policy and his thinking, right? It echoes well with one of the old books he published, which was, I think it was called Never Give Up. And it was Trump's whole philosophy around giving up and how you should never do it. His entire philosophy is that there is always, always, always a chance to keep going. And if there is even the tiniest sliver to continue going, if there's even the tiniest little opening, he will take it. And what he's doing right now just reflects that mentality. He does not ever, it seems, feel defeated. He only in the case. James Dyson. Was it Never Quit? You're saying that'd be your book title. Yeah, I think it was Never Give Up. The only reason he would ever have to give up would be if every single door was closed. Every single door, and that's it, right? And Trump, of course, does have a way forward. You've seen now that he has not lost his base. His base, I think, they don't even care. And this kind of goes in with what we knew we were getting with Trump from the get-go. People knew they were getting Donald Trump, the reality TV guy, the guy who was openly kind of a bit of a player for a little bit, you know, who did not hide his shortcomings, in other words. And for those of you who understand script writing or film writing or book writing or just writing in general, you'll know there's what's called the everyman, the individual everyone can relate to, the traits that make a person relatable. Do you know what one of the biggest ones is? It's being flawed. You understand? An everyman is a flawed man. An everyman is someone who is okay with being vulnerable, who can show his weaknesses, and doesn't necessarily try to cover that, you know, to hide parts of himself from view. Trump was always kind of like that, and so in a way, people already knew what they were getting into with him. Do you know? I would say you have a few. You have a few guys like that. I'd say Joe Rogan is kind of like an everyman. He'll go and he'll denigrate himself and he'll joke, and he's the kind of guy everyone can get along with, because he shows his shortcomings. He's flawed, right? He shows his weaknesses. I would argue that when they say he's not president, Trump, when he's not presidential, it's because he's flawed. He'll go to North Korea and make jokes about being fat with Kim Jong Un, you know, like stuff like that, which I still get a kick out of, to be honest. He tells them, make sure you take photos of us to make us look very slim. And Kim Jong Un's there, and I don't know if he understood what Trump was saying, but things like that, things like that I would say even his supporters probably like kind of like moan a little bit, like, oh my gosh, but it's funny. Like, I can still laugh. I'm still laughing about it because it's that funny. You know what I mean? But that's not diplomatic. That's not like the way you normally do things in politics. That's not presidential. You know what I'm saying? What defines that then? Well, it's not an everyman. The politician is a composed, flawless individual. The politician is a person who hides their shortcomings in most cases, and it makes them appear trustworthy. It gives a deeper air of power or authority, but it's not relatable necessarily. And I would say that you have a lot of politicians, I think, trying to figure out what Trump does well. Like, how does he get people to rally around him? And I think that's it, actually. Everybody has flaws. Let's be honest with ourselves. Like, I guarantee you, none of us is flawless. Not a single one of us. None of us. Nobody. But you have two types of people. You have people who are, yeah, like, I have my shortcomings. I work on them personally. I'm a flawed individual trying to become better, and that, I think that in my personal opinion, that's part of what being a good person is. A flawed person trying to become a better person. And then you have people who try to pretend they're perfect. And the people who try to pretend they're perfect, you got to kind of watch out for them, I'll be honest. The people who try to pretend they're perfect are the guys with the skeletons in their closets. It's the Chucky, serial killer neighbor vibe, you know what I mean? The guy who looks flawless, whenever you have these like serial killers, they interview the neighbors. He was such a nice guy. He was such a nice person. Because he's hiding that stuff. You know what I'm saying? A person like that is not relatable, actually. There's something off-putting about it. And I think, unfortunately, you have a lot of people within political circles who are like, they try very hard to hide their shortcomings, to the point where I think they're very afraid of ridicule and such. Trump's not like that. The point I'm getting to with all this, though, is it's the reason, I think, on why Trump's base is actually sticking with him, despite the fact that he's getting charged with this. It's the reason they're sticking with him and actually rallying around him even more, despite all this. It's why, you learn about Stormy Daniels, and he's, doing stuff with porn stars, and you're like, that's Trump. People don't seem to care, actually. If anything, I have a friend, I think he was Canadian, actually. I believe he's Canadian. Sorry, one sec. I think he's a Canadian guy, and he was talking about the character of Americans. And he said, Americans are very funny. Americans, they don't really care if you have issues. They will actually forgive you. I've heard this from a few people, actually. Actually, quite a few people have told me this. One of the defining traits of Americans is that they're very forgiving, if you're honest. And that's the big point. If you are honest, and if you're straightforward with it, I've had friends who worked in a lot of countries. They say you go to Mexico, you go to Saudi Arabia, you go to China, you work in these countries, and if you fail, you're done. You are shot. You're not going to get another chance in a lot of countries. America, it's not like that. You can fail, and you can get back up and you can apologize and you can say, I'm working on myself and I believe I've learned from this, and people will generally forgive you. And I don't know if it's, again, just purely that everyman nature or just the nature of Americans, but I don't think these things affect votes in America to the degree that I believe the individuals trying to prosecute Trump thought that they would. Again, it's having the opposite effect. To the point now, again, Trump is probably pretty much has it in the bag as the Republican nominee. Take that for what you will when it comes to the general elections, but the nominee, he pretty much has it. He has a 40-point lead now over DeSantis. That said, let me show you a couple other things, folks. Actually, on that note, after this segment, I'll show you the episode from last night. I had an interview with one of the main guys doing the polling, and we actually talk more about that, so I'll go into that with y'all. E-Vibe, say the numbers again. Do you really want me to, or are you joking because I said them like 3 times? I'll say them anyways. All right, let me show you. Post-millennial. Trump is polling at 61% following federal indictment, knocking out DeSantis by nearly 40-point lead. President Trump is blowing out his competition in the GOP primary election, with recent polls revealing a whopping 61% of likely Republican voters will support him in the 2024 election following his federal indictment. According to a CBS News and YouGov poll, this is CBS, keep in mind, President Trump is leading his top primary opponent, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, by nearly 40 points. 61% of GOP voters say they will support Trump, and 23% said they will vote DeSantis. Former Vice President Mike Pence, Tim Scott, each receiving 4 points, 4% of the vote. Former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley received 3%, and so on and so on. It's in the bag, folks. And again, Trump can still, he can run for president like behind bars. They can throw him behind bars, and he can have his like teardrop, prison tattoo going, and he can still run for president. I'll be honest with you, they might find him guilty on process crimes. I don't think the Espionage Act stuff is going to hold up. But I really think that was to get him on the process crimes, and then to try to use the threat of the process crimes to get him to, make a plea deal. That's the way I see it, at least. Process crimes, it's going to come down to the lawyers and what the lawyers say, because technically his lawyers look like they did lie to the FBI. And the question is whether Trump told them to lie to the FBI, which I can't see him doing that, to be honest. But we'll see. Yeah, Cassie, he's already saying he's not going to plea, so, we'll see. Let me show you a couple more things. New York is pushing reparations briefly on this. This is AP News. New York lawmakers passed bill that considers reparations for slavery. New York will create a commission to consider reparations to address the lingering negative effects of slavery under a bill passed by the state legislature on Thursday. Isn't it funny that the states pushing for reparations are states that didn't have slavery? Kind of interesting, right? What is really going on with this, if you ask me, it's a bailout. It's not about giving Black Americans money. It's a bailout. It's a bank bailout. What's going to happen? Let's say California gets $1 billion to hand out to Black Americans for slavery. What's going to happen? The government's going to take 50% in taxes. Right? They're going to give them, okay, here's your $1 billion. Oops, there goes $500 million, and they'll stuff it in their pockets with taxes. And then the individuals, they're either going to buy stuff with it, or they're probably going to put it in the bank. What happens when they put it in the bank? Or what do you call it? Is it quantitative easing? The banks, folks, when you put $1 in, they can create $10 to invest. You're going to have them put that money in, and they're going to use it, multiply it by 10. It's all fiat currency anyways. They're printing trillions of dollars, including with the new budget. They're going to do that. It's going to reduce the value of the money again, meaning that $500 million is going to be worth even less. The banks are going to get a bailout in the form of reparations. The reparations are going to be a bank bailout, and that money is going to go into all their different radical causes. Yeah, thank you, Crash Bandits. Fractional reserve banking. I'm sorry, not quantitative easing. Fractional reserve banking. That's the name of that. They can create money, basically. You give them $1, they create $10. For every $1 you give them, they create $10, and they can use it for investment. That's the way our banks work. Once that happens, it's a bank bailout. It's a federal government bailout. The federal government takes their taxes. It's a local government bailout. New York and California are going to take their taxes, and then it's a bank bailout. And then if the individuals who get like the money at the end of it all, after they give them all this money, once they get that money, maybe they'll have enough to buy a house. Maybe they'll have enough to buy a car. And what's going to happen? They're going to get a mortgage, and they're going to get stuck in that whole system right over again. And then not only that, but they're going to get taxed, like sales tax on that as well. And then if you're in California, property tax and everything else, they're going to tax it every step of the way. It's a bailout disguised as an "I'm sorry for slavery" thing, ironically in states that don't even have slavery. That's how I see it personally. That's what I see them doing personally. When I see these things, I don't see a race issue. I see, they need tax money issue, and they're making the American people pay for it. That said, let's jump over to Epoch TV. I know we're talking. I mean, look, I don't want to talk about too many other stories because Trump facing charges in Florida today is like the big one, but I wanted to mention that to y'all. Let's jump over to Epoch TV, and I will see you there.